I was introduced to Polar products when I was interning as a strength and conditioning coach at University of Portland over a decade ago. All of the athletes had to wear a Polar heart rate strap, and we'd monitor their individual heart rates on a large screen. This allowed us to have each athlete work at their individual maximum, or whatever percentage we wanted them at, and to recover individually as well. So that if an athlete recovered quickly, they went sooner, and if an athlete required a bit more time to recover, they had that, and we could build that athlete's threshold. So should you get a Polar heart rate monitor? Is it worth it? Why would you ever purchase one? My name is Annie Miller, Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and I help you learn as you train and enjoy your lifts again. And I've owned 6 Polar watches and chest straps over the past 11 years. Today, I am giving you an in-depth review and possible application of the Polar Unite and H10 chest strap. During my time at UP and my intro to using Polar, I read Joel Jamieson's Ultimate Guide to MMA Conditioning. It is still one of my favorite, most applicable books for coaches in terms of program design for conditioning. It's essentially just energy systems development, which is working in some kind of cardio form based around your heart rate and your heart rate recovery. Before choosing to go into college strength, I actually debated trying to become a strength and conditioning coach for mixed martial artists because they are one of the first forms of athlete that really challenged that you can't build power or max output and endurance at the same time. MMA flips that notion on its head. These athletes have incredible endurance capacity as well as repeated power output, which is why I think Joel's methods are so amazing. And while they work for MMA athletes, they also work for anyone that has a heart and can move their body. Heart rate training is something that I use within my Built by Annie programming in the premium options. They have 1 day per week where conditioning is involved, and they can either work on time or their heart rate if they do have access to a heart rate monitor like a Polar watch and heart rate strap or some other kind of wearable device. So what is the Polar Unite? How accurate is it without the strap? When would you wear it, and what are the best uses for your training, both from an endurance standpoint as well as a strength training standpoint? The Unite is simply the watch that I have personally used for the past 3 to 5 years. I have almost always purchased their new watches from my college days to now. I stopped at the Unite because it still does everything that I need. I had the M430 as well as the A370 before that. In college, 10 years ago, I had 2 of the cheapest options. The screens literally looked like a Tamagotchi and only showed you the 5 zones. They were the FT4 and something else that I can't recall at this time. No color, no other options, but it got the job done for heart rate training. For the past decade, I believe I've owned 6 different Polar watches, like I said, and whatever chest strap worked with each watch. I cannot compare Polar watches to something like a Garmin or a Whoop or any other tracker because I love Polar. I am biased towards them. They are extremely accurate and they work for what I need. I am not a runner. I don't need GPS or any of the running specific features. I strictly need heart rate data, and that is what I get through the Polar watches, though they do have an entire line of watches with varying functionalities, so be sure to list out your needs, then decide which watch best fits those needs. Let's look at the functionality of the watch. You don't have to get the Polar Flow or the Polar Beat app if you don't want to. These apps sync up with your watch to hold past data so that you can more easily see it on a mobile device or on a desktop or laptop. These apps can keep track of all of your past sessions as well as your recovery scores and data. If you prefer to use the Polar Beat app during your training versus looking down at your watch, you can also do that, and you don't need to be wearing your watch. You can simply wear the chest strap and have your phone. It will sync up with the Bluetooth to the Polar Beat app. So you'll be able to see what zone you're in, your heart rate, and any other data that your watch tracks during a workout on your phone instead of your watch if you want that as an option. Either way, you can sync up your watch with the app afterwards and see the overall data. For instance, on the phone, you'll be able to see your heart rate, trends, rest periods, so the peaks and valleys where that is not going to be available on your watch face. I may go back on my word there a little bit as well because you might actually have to get the apps in order to set the watch up in the first place. I'm unsure, but don't quote me on that. I will start right out the gate by saying that the watches for me personally are highly inaccurate if not wearing the chest strap. The chest strap is imperative and gives you extremely accurate data as far as reading your heart rate in real time. So just know that I do think that you need the watch and the chest strap to get the most out of the device. Other functionalities are sleep data, respiratory rate, resting heart rate variability, daily step count, and overall activity. The sleep data for me does get the job done. It will give you an idea of if you're adequately recovered or not, but I do think that something like the Oura Ring tends to give you more accurate and concise data than the Polar Unite. I can't speak to higher or newer models of Polar watches. Perhaps they are more compatible with something like the Oura Ring. If you've heard of the Oura Ring or you're interested in that, be sure to check out my full review of the Oura Ring Gen 3. After a certain number of nights, the Polar Unite will give you a sleep rating. I find that this is mostly based on your heart rate data rather than the amount of sleep that you got. It obviously takes both of those things into account, but the heart rate recovery has a higher bearing, I think, on your overall score. It shows you a dial in your averages, so my green score or good score or very good score could be an 85, where a good score for my husband could be a 65 based on his data. That just gives you your baseline that you would obviously want to then bump up. The 65 is not a desirable score or a very good score. So that's something to keep in mind when looking at the sleep data. If you see that it's very good, but it's actually quite a low number out of 100, then you would want to see how you can optimize your sleep. Just like the Oura Ring, take these recovery numbers with a grain of salt in addition to your natural biofeedback. So how rested do you feel? How much energy do you have? Facts about your night that you're aware of. If you woke up several times in the night, or if you woke up feeling sick, maybe listen to that lower score. If you for some reason have a lower score when you wake up and you feel good, you feel rested and energized, then go about your day as you would and just maybe pay attention to how your energy fluctuates throughout the day. That covers your nighttime and recovery aspects of the watch. Now let's get into the application within your training and what you can expect. Do you use a heart rate monitor, Polar, Fitbit, Garmin, something else? Let me know in the comments section below. Actual application and usage of the watch. When you get the watch, you will enter your data points like your age, activity level, and there's a fitness test that you can take, I think, and enter your scores. Once you enter all of that data, you will get a baseline, and that will then determine what your actual zones are for training. There are 5 different zones, 1 being the lowest and 5 being your maximum heart rate. The zones are different percentage ranges of your maximum heart rate. You can use the watch out of curiosity just to see what your heart rate trend is during a certain form of cardio, or you can use the data from your watch to lead your training. This is where the functionality really depends on the type of training that you're doing. What I mean is that you could use the monitor to work at a certain percentage, let's say zone 4 or 5 for 3 minutes. The watch allows you to see when that 3 minutes begins and for you to hold that intensity for the full 3 minutes and then rest until your heart rate lowers 50 beats below whatever your max heart rate was during the working period. That would be considered a threshold style of energy systems development. You could do, let's say, 3 or 4 sets of that, and a trend you might be looking at is how long it takes your heart to recover in the rest period from set 1 to set 4. And also perhaps how quickly your heart rate spikes when you begin the working set. When we train around heart rate, you're looking for efficiency to be the result of the training, that your heart can pump blood more efficiently, meaning that it takes more work to get your heart rate close to the maximum output, and that your heart rate is recovering quicker and quicker. So when you're done with that working set, you're able to lower that heart rate back down. Those will be some of the parameters to look at when you are training around your heart rate or doing energy systems development. Again, whether you are a trainee or a coach, check out Joel Jamieson's Ultimate Guide to MMA Conditioning. I believe he also has a conditioning course. He teaches in a manner that I just think makes a lot of sense for coaches and trainees. It's a very applicable way that he teaches for energy systems development. If you get into heart rate specific training, great. But I also think it's just beneficial to wear the watch for a month to 3 months in whatever form of training you do and just observe and get familiar with your heart rate and your recovery. That applies to strength training, circuit training, playing a sport of some kind, any type of activity, you'll begin to see trends with your working sets and your rest periods. I'm an advocate for being curious about your body, and I think that curiosity builds efficacy within your training. If you're already familiar with your heart rate or heart rate training, then I just suggest getting the heart rate chest strap and the Unite or some other Polar watch that fits the needs that you have for your training. Another application on the strength training side of things can be how to marry conditioning with your workouts. You might see trends like having a higher heart rate during your working sets on a leg day versus an upper body day if you do some kind of upper-lower split. You can also use the watch to track your rest periods, or try playing around with resting until your heart rate is recovered to a certain beat per minute and then beginning your next working set. That's just something you can play around with. As far as pairing some kind of conditioning with your strength training, be sure to check out my video on if cardio will ruin your strength gains, if that's something that interests you. One option you have is to look at the overall trend of your strength training workout, if that is your primary goal, and match that trend with the type of cardio that you're doing for the day. For example, upper body days tend to be lower overall intensity, and they can tend to be a lower duration lift. They don't take as much time. So in theory, you could choose to do low intensity steady state cardio or LISS on your upper body days and have that entire training session be zone 2 or zone 3. This is not black and white. I'm just giving options for application of using this device within your strength training. On the flip side of that, you could use the cardio to increase your overall intensity of a lift and pair high intensity continuous training, HICT, where you keep your heart rate in zone 4 and 5 for 12 to 15 minutes up to 20 minutes on an upper body day, and that would bring up the overall median of your intensity for that day's exercise. My point is you have options, and if you're into biofeedback or want some data on what your heart rate and respiratory rate is actually doing during conditioning or strength training, I think it's worth it if you have the funds. Polar is the gold standard brand in my opinion. The chest strap is a game changer, and I do think you need it. As far as comfortability goes, perhaps it is because I am a female and I'm used to wearing a sports bra, but it sits right under my sports bra strap or in line with my sports bra strap, and I don't even notice it. I've personally never had a client or athlete that has been bothered by wearing the chest strap, and you can tighten it or loosen it to your needs and to your comfort. That's it. That is all. I am a fan. I think that was clear. Take what you need and leave the rest.